What we're looking at now is Chapter 3, Promoting Physical Activity, and primarily looking at settings-based approaches, government and non-government bodies. So as you can see from the Wordle, again, the words that are largest: physical activity, community, school, and programs. So that gives us an indication of what we're going to be talking about. Key knowledge: the role of government and non-government organisations in promoting adherence to the National Physical Activity Guidelines in schools, workplace and communities, including Vic Health and the National Health Foundation, state and federal government departments. Look at a range of individual and population-based Australian physical activity promotion initiatives and strategies, and the key skills is to be able to collect and analyse information on initiatives and strategies aimed at increasing physical activity levels locally. So our government and non-government roles, right up here. The promotion in schools, communities and workplace, these are our settings that we look at, and then here these are our strategies. The role of government and non-government organisations. The government department that is responsible for the monitoring and promotion of health behaviour, which obviously includes physical activity, is the Australian Department of Health and Ageing. This little bit in here: why would the government spend millions of dollars establishing and then monitoring, evaluating research systems based on promotion of physical activity? From a cynical perspective, because it costs them less dollars than that to do that than to be treating people in hospital who suffer for the consequences of being physically inactive. So on the Healthy and Active Australia website, they give information to different strategies, such as Get Set for Life, the Stephanie Alexander Kitchen Garden National Program. Now, this one here, although it's probably a very good initiative and program, it's not one that looks at physical activity. So when it comes to the exam or the SAC, we need to be able to report on physical activity strategies. This, obviously under an obesity strategy, is very good because it's looking at the intake. However, we're looking at the output of physical activity. Healthy Spaces and Places, Community and Schools Grants Program, Learning from Successful Community Obesity Initiative, again important if we're looking at the physical activity aspect of that. Healthy weight information and resources, and how do you measure up. So yet again, important if we can get information regarding physical activity out of it. Okay, from the textbook as opposed from the website, so a number of physical activity initiatives. So National Physical Activity Guidelines, Children's Nutrition and Physical Activity Survey. So this will provide us with demographics. So the stats, the data at different ages. Get Set for Life, so healthy habits For kids, again, physical activity won't look at this one because it doesn't look at physical activity. Healthy spaces and places, community and schools grants program. So what these two are most likely to be doing is looking at the environment and the constructed environment at that. Learning from successful community initiatives, again we want the physical activity aspect of that, physical activity aspect of healthy weight, physical activity aspect of how do you measure up. The Australian Sports Commission, active after school communities. So here's a government body that is providing access to physical activity as well as childcare after schools. Get moving, so a mass media campaign looking at youth, and it is with respect to physical activity. Choose Health, Be Active, a physical activity guide for older Australians. So here we've got an aspect of tailoring because it's looking at different ages. And then the last one, Travel Smart, which looks at active transportation but looks at it across a number of settings. An example of the Get Moving campaign, we have a website, so that's obviously how the information is going to get across. It has information, it's got ads that were shown, it's got events, now this is an interesting looking framework. It's from Be Active Australia, which ran 2005 till 2010. So where it starts off is with determinants. So these here look very, very much like our individual, social, environment that's constructed, natural, and policy. So they've got individual, psychosocial, cultural, environmental, economic, and the health system. Then the strategic focus looks at the settings in which it's going to be held. So again, could be workplace, school, community, overreaching strategies. So how are they planning on delivering this and which population groups? And then obviously it's important to work out what outcomes you're wanting. So increase health and well-being, decrease health and care costs, decrease inequity of access to physical activity, decrease disease, decrease disability. So these are the settings that they looked at: community environments and organisations, health services, childcare, whether it's in and out of school hours, schools and workplaces. The overreaching strategies, so how are they going to look at doing it? Communication and community education. Look at workforce capacity. They're going to use evidence and research, monitoring and evaluation. The evidence is when setting up a strategy. So they want to base it on previous models that have worked. So empirical data, and based on things that have worked. and then strategic management and coordination. The priority populations, so Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders as a population group are seen to be less active than other or some other groups. And then interesting here, they've got populations with special needs. Any population group that has a lower overall physical activity or take part in lower levels of physical activity would actually classify in this as well. So for example, people from a non-English speaking background are less likely to participate in physical activity also. So this is just having a look at the state government. So what's Victoria done? We did have Go For Your Life, which is no longer, which is now the Better Health Channel. Again, Kids Go For Your Life no longer exists, Better Health Channel. And they also did Walktober. Walktober, looking at increasing the amount of walking that you do in October, based on 10,000 steps a day. And funnily enough, the corporate challenge occurs in October, and the aim for corporate bodies is to get as many people joining groups within that organisation to walk the 10,000 plus steps a day. So the corporate challenge, it works on the individual by providing them information about the benefits of physical activity. It provides everyone with a pedometer, so it's giving them the resources to actually be able to monitor their own individual physical activity. People are divided up into groups, so that places emphasis then on the social side of things. They encourage walking groups to be established within the groups. From an environment perspective, they don't do very much. Very hard across a very, very wide ranging, which is in fact a global corporate challenge, to be able to affect the environment too much, other than to provide information as to examples of how you could, but that then comes back to the individual as giving them knowledge. And then there is policy surrounding the program as to when you need to be able to upload information, the fact that you do need to upload information, that there are dollar costs involved, etc. So a school setting approach, a settings approach, limited opportunities to move and expend large amounts of energy as part of daily routine. Increase in technology has decreased health because of a lack of need to be physical active. An increase in wealth in developing countries often leads to increased mechanisation, so again reduced physical activity, and several other factors contribute to the problem, and it's not only individual behaviour. So this is the result of social, environmental and lifestyle changes that have all led to decreased physical activity. So if we address social, environmental and lifestyle, how are we best to do it? Best done in a setting. And the reasons why coming up here. So within a school setting, why would we want to be targeting people at school? The main reason is because the vast proportion of young people, and I'm grouping that as our 5 to 12, 12 to 18, the vast majority of these people, where are they? They're at school. So it provides us access to the vast majority of people aged 5 to 18. Here are examples in the text for school and community programs with respect to policy, environment, within physical education classes, health education classes, extracurricular activities, parental involvement, the training of staff, health services, community programs, but then also importantly the evaluation of these. Why is evaluation important? What went well? Why do we want to know that? So we can replicate it. What didn't work? Why? So we can change it. A couple of research pieces of information from a school setting. Compared with the usual physical activity interventions, school-based physical activity promotion programs are moderately effective. They're not poor, but they're not wonderful. They're moderately effective with children and adolescent girls. The next one is an important one because it says that those people who participate in school-based physical activity as children are significantly more active during adulthood. And what was or what made up the most effective ones? Ones that included printed materials, curriculum that promoted physical activity, the whole day, recess, lunchtime, classroom, and physical and sport education classes. So yes, it provided the information. Yes, with lunchtime, classroom, physical activity and sport, doing it with their friends and peers, works on the social, being able to give them a place to actually participate in physical activity, looks at the environmental, and obviously the policy comes into being that physical education in schools is mandated from prep through to year 10. And again, looking at the school-based initiatives, similar to what we just looked at the first one. Combination of social uses strategies to change individual behaviour, so we can either provide them greater knowledge or access to knowledge, or we can provide them with skills. So our better skills mean that they're going to be more likely to want to carry on with physical activity. So knowledge is cognitive, skills behavioural. They're able to use physical activity in cultural and leisure events, incorporate activities within the formal school curriculum. Examples that they've listed here: the walking school bus program and Kids Go for Your Life. So again, interesting that we know that Kids Go For Your Life no longer exists. It's the Better Health channel. And just as interesting is our walking school bus program. The reason why I say interesting is that the government no longer funds this. The reason why the government no longer funds the walking school bus is that they believed that the walking school bus was not an effective strategy. However, some schools have taken the payment of this on their own. So they recognised that it was very effective for their community, so they've continued to run it and fund it. So there's an example of one thing not suiting everyone. For some schools it didn't work, for some schools it did work. The information on the walking school bus, Kids Go For Your Life, so that's in our textbook. Okay, our community settings. Community, groups of people from the same suburb, town, city or country. So obviously it can be quite small, suburb, quite large, country. Now there are some challenges. Why? Because within each one of those settings there is still going to be a range of other people that, like our walking school bus, if we have one strategy for the entire suburb, it might tick a couple of subgroups but may not reach a couple of others. Why? Because of the diversity. What we need to be able to do to have a more effective approach, here's a particular strategy that is going to be tailored so that it works for this group, works for this group, and then may need to be altered slightly so that these other two groups also find it effective. It's not necessarily a one glove that fits every hand approach. The World Health Organization, looking at community settings, says that neighbourhood setting is a priority. Why a neighbourhood? Well, if we're looking at our country, our state, city, and then the suburb within the city, because this is the smallest of the groups, it's less likely to have as many subsets. But if we looked at the whole country, then we've already established different subgroups that are then themselves going to have different subsets again themselves, leading down into a suburb. The World Health Organization needs, or suggests we need to look at everyday tasks, so things that people do every day. Walking to the shop to buy bread, milk, post to letter. So here looking at active transportation. So what's the difference between active transportation and simply going for a walk? Active transportation, you must have a destination. And the destination in these examples is going to the shop. So the shop's the destination, or the post box is the destination. The next one is parks, green spaces, streetscapes, beaches and recreation facilities. Why? because these things are seen to increase levels of physical activity, surprisingly enough. With the parks and green spaces, the more aesthetically pleasing an area is, the more likely people are to want to walk in it. And we know that walking is the most participated in physical activity. This point down here, characteristics of effective community-based settings include those in which the infrastructure, funding and organisational structures exist to maximise the impact of the coordinated programs. So there's no point in running a learn how to play tennis initiative in a rural town if that town in fact has no tennis courts. So the actual infrastructure needs to be there. Community settings, again, would tend to use mass media to get the information across to many people. Again, we looked at print versus mass, and when we're looking at print, we were looking at booklets and brochures, etc., not the print within the mass environment such as newspapers and magazines. So print and booklets are aiming really at the individual, so a very small scale, whereas mass media, obviously with the term mass, we're looking at population accessing that information. So community settings, they spread important messages, mainly raising awareness, the benefits of physical activity, the consequences of inactivity. However, impact will be limited if there are insufficient resources to maintain the campaign. So if you simply run the campaign for 3 weeks and then stop, it's going to be far less effective than if you run the campaign for 3 weeks, but then you keep it running in the background. You give it support and you give it funding, make sure that there's access to equipment, facilities, etc. It's more likely to work. A couple of examples of community settings. Go for Your Life in Victoria, so we'll change that to the Better Health channel now. Be Active, Get Moving, 10,000 steps, and Find 30. So they're, again, community initiatives. Why would we look at a workplace for a setting? Well, similarly to schools, where we have the greatest proportion of 5 to 18-year-olds, again, the workplace, the majority of the population works part or full-time, and it's for a large proportion of their lives. So again, we have a large or a high amount of access to adults. Because people work together, we can provide social support, share environmental resources. So automatically we're looking at individuals, we're looking at social, and we're looking at environmental there. This is from a framework paper, and it's looking at why workplace setting should be used to approach for preventative health. Medibank research into workplace health found that in 2005 and 6, the cost of presenteeism, as in opposed to absenteeism, was estimated to be $25.7 billion. Now, on average, 6 working days of productivity are lost for each employee annually. are lost as a result of presenteeism. Now, I apologise, when reading this, I said not absenteeism, but it is in fact the lack of being present that they're referring to. So $25.7 billion lost as a result of people being absent, and we know that the more physically active someone is, the less likely they are to be absent from work. So this is a large amount. They find that physical inactivity is another major cause of workplace ill health. So, relationship here, let's increase physical activity and let's decrease workplace ill health. If workplace ill health is decreased, then we will decrease our absenteeism. Just some graphs and data. So this is looking at the percent distribution of individuals' social and environmental influences on physical activity within the workplace. So again, we're looking at some demographics here. So, bored at work, or bored with physical activity at work, lack of time. So these are reasons as to why people wouldn't participate. This is now looking at participating. So 75% believe physical activity is important. Just over 50% of colleagues participate in physical activity. However, around about 23% the employer would not allow time. Managers believe physical activity is important, 60%, and so on. So what you can use these stats or data for, being demographics, is simply that if you want to create a strategy, then maybe knowing that 75% of people believe it's important and that 50% have colleagues, well, this one here, we can certainly work on the social aspect of things. With managers participating in physical activity, it would suggest that from a top-down structure they believe it's important, and therefore what policy maybe could be put into place to allow physical activity to be done more easily. So again, these are just examples straight out of the text. For workplace, for workers, find 30 minutes every day. Why not? Find 60. What is it about find 30 that's important with the 30? Have a think about that with respect to the National Physical Activity Guidelines for adults. Also from a practical perspective within a workplace. Some examples in here as to actual workplace case studies. So one from Australian Unity, one from Victoria University, and from WorkSafe Victoria. This is another one looking at every step counts, so a walking based intervention program, and it's from Melbourne Health. Work Health provide a how healthy is your workplace check. So it's an audit tool that companies can use to see how active their workplace is or what they allow. We then have a audit tool or audit tools that we can go through and either tick as yes, no, so that we can actually see where possibly within workplaces we could increase levels of physical activity. And then we've got an example of programs across all three settings, such as Travel Smart, Australian initiatives such as Vic Health, and the National Heart Foundation. So it is up to you to have a look at the National Health Foundation, to Vic Health, and find out, do they cater for the individual? Do they cater for social? Do they cater for environmental? Do they cater for policy?